So now we approached to the second stage of the self-directed learning, implementation of the plan individually or in collaboration. And here is the question. What is the role of an educator in a self-directed learning? And if learners are self-directed, then why do we need an educator in general? The goal of learners is to become independent, yes. But self-directed learning is not about solitary learning. It can be highly interdependent, collaborative, and cooperative. And ironically, collaboration is a very important part of self-directed learning. And as you remember from previous lectures, collaboration is critically important for adult students because it helps neuron pathways to emerge in a brain, and it helps learning process actually to happen. So on this stage, the educator provides guidance for critical thinking, for brainstorming, and various types of creative thinking. And the main role of educator is to be a facilitator. I advise you to learn two methods, Scrumper and false faces method, which both are described by Michael Michalko. There are many sites where you can find the description of these methods. And I also advise you to visit the site of the Right Question Institute. It is NGO, which is specialized on teaching adults and children and youth. They have programs for all of these categories to formulate and ask inquiry questions, beautiful questions, effective questions, helping in learning and everyday life situations. And I ask you to do it independently, rely totally on self-directed approach. And I will share with you those two methods, which are not that much described in the internet, but which I find effective and use in my own practice. All of these methods are based on questions. Actually, even those which I ask you to find independently, they are also based on questions. Questions is a core element of many methods which you can use on the stage of implementation of self-directed learning. And there is a famous quotation made by Einstein, which I really much like, and I consider that can be linked to a main purpose of the self-directed learning methods. If I had an hour to solve a problem and my life depended on the solution, I would spend the first 45 minutes determining the proper question to ask. Once I know the proper question, I could solve the problem in less than 5 minutes. So many methods have questions as a core element because questions trigger divergent thinking, because questions not only make the mind open, but they are also able to guide and focus the thinking process. And they provide opportunity to think and act in the face of uncertainty, which is also very important. So the first method I want to share with you, this method is called three-component innovation questioning. It is a simple and method, and it consists from 3 groups of questions following one another. Why, what if, and how. Seems quite easy, yeah? And to show you the effectiveness of this method, I want to tell you a story. This story starts in the late 1970s when Van Phillips was 21 years old, carefree college student, natural athlete, and avid thrill seeker. He was water skiing one day with his friends when his motorboat hit him and its propeller submerged his left leg, just below the knee. After recuperating in the hospital, Phillips was given a prosthetic foot made of wood and foam rubber. At the time, it was the best thing that the industry could offer him. But Phillips found that this replacement limb to be clumsy, uncomfortable, and limiting. This led Phillips to ask questions which would change his life and eventually the lives of many other people who found themselves in the same situation as him. So he asked himself, why can't a prosthetic leg perform more like a human one? Why can't it bend and flex, enabling a person to run and jump? His seemingly very naive questions were challenging to the experience of those who knew much more than he on the subject. Doctors, the prosthetic engineers, and others who understood what was possible and what was impossible in the industry in that time. And for them, Van Phillips was just a person who refuses to accept the reality and who refuses to accept simple facts about his state of health. But still, he persisted in asking his why and why not questions. So it took him about 20 years of inquiring questions, and he asked the same sequence that I presented to you in the beginning. Questions from the group why, questions from the group what if, and questions from the group how. So he was trying to challenge the situation and to find the way out. Finally, at the end of all this process, he made the breakthrough in the WHO industry. But now I would like you just to show some questions that he asked himself during this quite difficult period of trying to find the solution. So from the group of why questions on the material used, why the tree when there are so many bad alternatives? On the form, why a leg prosthesis must be as massive as a human foot? On the main purpose of replacing and of the amputated part, why so much importance is given to the external similarity with a human foot? Isn't the functionality more important? When he found the answers to these questions, he started to generate ideas. What if he tries to do something different than the WHO industry in the country? What if I can somehow reproduce the driving force of the springboard in the prosthesis? What if a human foot was more like a leg of a cheetah? What if we abandon the traditional L-shaped connection of the leg with the foot and create a prosthesis in the form of a smooth, continuous curve of the lower leg to the toes? When he found the answers on the stage of what if, and he generated many ideas, the stage of how question came. So how to implement ideas, how to choose the ideas to pilot them, how to decide which ideas are most suitable to me, how to start testing this idea to see what works and what does not. If it does not work, how can I find the error and correct it? These questions were uncovered for journalists, which made numerous interviews with Van Phillips after he became famous. But the most important thing that answering these questions, he managed to create 100 prototypes of the flex foot. And finally, he created his famous cheetah prosthesis, which became the revolutionary finding in the industry of artificial foods. And what is very important, Van Phillips could jump on it, and not only jump, but also run, which was absolutely impossible before, which meant that a person with an artificial leg would run, jump, and compete on an Olympic level. So I found this story a wonderful example of what self-directed learning can lead to, guided by a simple sequence of 3 groups of inquiry questions. You can do the same with adult learners, giving them a frame of 3 groups of questions. Inside each group, they can formulate questions relevant to their goal and their topic. And usually, this method leads to wonderful surprises. The second method I could share with you is called question storming. So we all know what is brainstorming, but I do not like brainstorming very much because in this method, somebody always owns the answer. There is the owner of the answer, owner of the idea. And when you make the brainstorming in a group of people with different experience or with different positions, it is sometimes difficult because people look at the ideas of those who are higher in the position or more experienced and accept ideas as a better ideas. In question storming, it's not possible. Questions do not belong to anyone. Nobody owns a question. So question storming is a better method for adult audience because it really stimulates for cooperation. This method has 3 stages. On the first stage, you should set a topic. You can do it yourself as an educator, or you can use the group of learners and they can help you to set a topic. But the most important thing about the topic is that it is formulated as a statement. And the statement should be somehow controversial. For example, our values are outdated. Controversial? Yeah. Education will move totally online in the nearest future. Controversial? Yes. So the most important thing, the statement should fit to the field and the subject which you teach. So now I just give you general ideas, but when you formulate, it should really fit to the subject. The second stage is generating questions. With a topic statement to guide a session, participants should take about 20 or 30 minutes of their own time to generate as many questions as they can that relate to the topic statement. Educators should just keep the time and encourage participants to generate questions freely. It is critical that all questions are documented in a way that allows them to be filtered and organized later. Post-it notes, small pieces of paper, or digital collaboration tools are the excellent examples of what you can do. So they generate their questions individually, and it is better that they generate not less than 10-20 questions. When 10 to 10 questions from each person is ready, the third stage comes. It is refine and share stage. When the time runs out, and each participant should add their question to a central location, like a large wall, for example. It's important to gather them in a central place where group members can visualize themselves and make connection between many questions. And it's best to allow about 5 and 10 minutes of quiet time for participants to look all over the questions just before doing something with them, just to stick them on the wall or to stick them on some large surface, and to give them about 5-10 time just to read and to reflect on these questions. And at this point, the educator should begin to group questions into buckets, or to cluster them together with the group. So of course, you will not work with a huge majority of questions. You have to cluster them to be able to work further. So some clusters can reflect the most challenging questions. Some can gather questions that bring some clarity. The third can be question that brings some understanding. So you create categories based on the question that are presented. The most important thing is somehow to organize all these questions into groups. And when it's done, at the last stage, a group chooses questions they need to answer to find a solution to a problem or to research a topic which was stated in the beginning, or to find the right answer to the problem that was inside of this statement which you offered them in the beginning. So from generating questions individually to putting them all together in one space and clusterizing those questions, the group comes to picking out the most beautiful and most effective questions, answering which they can solve a problem, they can research a topic, or find the answer to the main question. This method can be combined, and I can tell you how I do it in my own practice. I can give you an example. So I combine these methods on training courses for educators who want to learn how to design good educational programs. So when we already learn the main topics like methods of education, goal, how to choose the content, how to evaluate the program, here at the last stage when they have to produce a draft of their educational program, I ask them to create a draft challenging their usual vision of how educational programs should look like. So I don't want them to produce something very typical. I want them to be creative, and I want them to rely on self-directed learning approach in creation of an effective, interesting, creative educational program. So I give them several questions, and I ask them, please start to generate, start to create the template for your educational program only after you find the answer to the following questions. So what kind of questions I give my learners? Why do we design educational program by one model? Why is my program not as good as I want it to be? Why can't my program find a way to participants? What if we change the usual model of the program to the opposite? How to connect the new framework with the content, methods, and quality conditions? Challenging. So I want them to find the answers, and only after that, make a draft of the educational program. When they have their draft, and the draft is usually very short, I gather them in the offline working meeting. And on this working meeting, I divide the whole group into small groups, and the whole day they will work in these small groups. So I use the question storming method to improve, to help them to improve the draft that they already have. And I serve just as a facilitator. What do I do? So I divide the group into subgroups, and I divide the program into components like target audience, educational goal, the content, methods, teaching strategy, evaluation, etc. Every component has its own table in the room. Program drafts each participant brought together with them to this workshop or to this meeting act like those statements. To work with every component, group has 45 minutes. When we start, group starts from any component. For example, the group number 1 starts with the component educational goal. During 45 minutes, they examine the drafts of each person in their subgroup and formulate beautiful, interesting inquiry question to the component educational goal. So they read educational goal that each one of them in a subgroup created and write creative questions about this component for each other. When the 45 minutes finish, they change their tables clockwise and they move somewhere. For example, the next table will be methods of education. So which means again, that during this 45 minutes, they read what kind of methods each one of them in the subgroup proposes for this program. And they create beautiful, effective, and inquiry questions which can help the author of this program to improve this component. At the end of the day, every person, every learner has a set of creative questions to the program design proposal. Now, job of participants is to work independently again, sort out questions, find the most innovative, and try to answer them, making the program better and better. And when they have the answers to these questions, I gather them again on the next meeting, and then they can share ideas, what they improved, how these questions help them to improve the program, why they changed something, and why they consider that now their programs are better and more innovative. So usually people who come to my courses are from different professional areas. Some are teachers of foreign language, some are conflict managers or mediators, some ecology, some are from the ecology sphere, or art, crafts, and so on. So I'm not an expert in all those fields. I can't teach them how to create a good component in their field, but what I can do is I can create a framework for self-directed learning and help them to find out on their own how to improve their program, or how to create the most innovative program using a group as a resource. So the common feature of all the methods for self-directed learning is a framework with which individually or in collaboration, learners can reach their own goal. And I advise you to read two books, A More Beautiful Question by Warren Berger and Thinker Toys by Michael Michalko. They both are sources of limitless insights on how you can organize a stage of implementation of a self-directed learning when working with